your PrintBox StudioBox tutorial. So if you got a box that looks like this that says PrintBox on the front, you are ready to start your print project. So let's take a look at what you've got in your box. When you unbox it, you're going to find several things. You've got a handful of page instructions, which I'm going to go through the steps of with you here today. You also have a piece of rubber linoleum. This is what we call your block. The block in printmaking is anything that you carve on, and it is rubbery, so it's a little bit bendy, but it will break in half if you bend it too far. So I'd be really careful with it. Notice that it's bendy and that it's soft. You're going to be carving into the surface and creating what's called a lino cut. So this kind of rubber material is linoleum. A printmaker would say, I'm making a lino cut. That's the type of print they're making. So you're going to make a lino cut. You're also going to see that there is a brayer, which is the roller that you will use to put your ink onto your lino block. So you're going to be rolling your ink on using a brayer. You're also going to notice that you have a tool that looks like this. This is your handle for your carving tool, and this little nozzle here is where you're going to attach your blades. The back of this opens up, and on the inside you have a variety of carving blades with different shapes for making different sizes of cuts. And those are called nibs, N-I-B-S, nibs. And we're going to use those nibs to be carving into our rubber linoleum. You also have a little, you either have a little cup like this, or you might have a really small squeeze tube of ink like this. They're both the same. My cat is joining our tutorial. You will also have in your box 5 pieces of paper for printing a series of 5 prints. So these pieces of paper are for doing your final 5 prints. There are a few things that you're going to need from home in order to do this project. So one of the things you're going to need is a surface to roll your ink out on. And we want to roll our ink out on something that is glossy and smooth, not something like regular paper that's going to absorb the ink. So we wouldn't want to use like magazine, or we wouldn't want to use newspaper or regular printer paper. You need something that is slick on the surface so that it's not absorbing or soaking in the ink. So I have wax paper here. A magazine page would work. It's not the best, but that will work. You can use tin foil. You can use some saran wrap. What I would suggest doing is securing this to another surface. So I got this piece of cardboard out of my recycling. I just cut the front of a pancake mix box, and I'm actually going to use some tape and tape my wax paper down to my surface. And this is going to help keep it nice and tight. When I flip this over, I've got a nice little clean plate that I'll be able to roll my ink on later, okay? Something else that you're going to need is a tool like a butter knife, anything that is flat on the end and small enough to dip into your jar of ink if you have one. Now, if you're one of the people that has a tiny little tube of this ink, then you will not need that knife because you can just squeeze right out of here. You also are going to need some just random scrap paper to make a couple of test prints, because the 5 pieces of paper that you have here are really nice 5 pieces of paper, and you want to do your nice prints on this paper that was in your box once you've got a handle on printing. So even lined paper will work, any piece of scrap paper will work just fine. So those are the things that you're going to need from home. So number 1 on your instructions is to unbox your print box. Well, you've already done that. Step 2 is to plan your design. So you're actually going to draw right onto the surface of your linoleum block. If you would like, you can practice drawing it on a piece of paper first just to get your design quite right, and then when you feel positive that that's the design you want, you're going to draw it right onto your linoleum block. I suggest using pencil. I will let you know that you won't be able to erase on your linoleum block, so draw lightly. If you make a mistake, you can correct it by drawing a darker line. You are going to have black areas and white areas. Those are the only 2 color options that you have. Just like a stamp, it either takes the ink or it doesn't. But then I would like for you to color in any area that you want to be black. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing in my design on here. All right, so now I have used my pencil to draw my design onto my linoleum block. Notice that I've colored in everything that I want to be black, and I've left blank everything that I want to be white. So the black is going to represent the part that catches the ink, and the white is going to represent the part where I don't want any black ink to catch. So those are the areas we're going to be carving down. So we're done with page 1 of our instructions. Page 2 brings us to loading the tool. So when we take a look at our blades inside here, our nibs, you're gonna notice that there are different shapes on the ends. Now all of them have this rounded shape. Let me just grab a couple of them here. All of them have this rounded kind of duckbill shape that's not sharp on this end. But each of them has a different shaped sharp side. So when we look at these two, this one is our smallest tool, and you can see it's got a really tiny little V shape, and this one is like a U shape. It's a wide cut. So any area that I'm wanting to cut out a big area, I'm going to use this wide cut tool. Any little tiny detail I'm cutting out, I'm going to want to use that tiny little detail tool. So I'm going to start with let's see, I think I'm going to start with this medium tool here that's kind of like a medium V. And I want to put that tool into my carving handle. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Anytime that you're not using your tools, just because we don't want these to fall on the floor and somebody step on them, I always like to store the ones I'm not using inside the handle. Okay, so I just have one nib out at a time. And I want you to take a look at this part here. When I loosen this, I'm loosening this part here, it's loosening the parts that are on the inside. If I continue to loosen this, this whole part's gonna fall off, and I can show you how to put that back on later. But I wanna loosen it enough so that I can slide this duckbill non-sharp part in between. There's a ball in there and there's a little skinny rainbow, and I want to loosen this enough to get it in between those two pieces. When you loosen the nozzle of your tool, here are the pieces that are actually on the inside. There's a part that has a little ball bearing on the end that's covered by a little rainbow letter C looking piece. Those two are connected together. You also have this separate letter C that kind of curves around the other side to complete this little puzzle. Now inside your nozzle, what you're going to do is actually put the non-sharp side in between that letter C and the ball. So it's going to slide in between there like that, and then you're going to tighten the nozzle. Now if you unloosen your nozzle all the way, it might come completely apart like this, and that's okay. You didn't break it. I'll show you how to put it back together. So I've got my big piece. I'll put my little puzzle together. So I've completed this little puzzle, and then I'm going to drop it down into here with the ball side facing the opening. Okay, so I'll put this back on. That may happen to you a couple times. Don't worry, you can put it back together. You can always come back and revisit this video. So now it's harder to see while the pieces are in there, but I should be able to slide that duckbill non-sharp side all the way down in between that little C and the ball. So it should go all the way down in there, and then I'm going to tighten this. We don't want this to be wobbly or loose, so it should be nice and sturdy on the end. If it's wiggling, you need to take it out, and it's just not in there quite right. So now we're ready to carve. All right, so now that I have the tool that I want in my carving handle here, I'm ready to use that nib to carve out on my project. Now it's so important that we keep our mind straight on what we're carving and what we're not. You want to carve everything that's white, and anything that's black, including a shaded in black area or even a black outline, you want to leave raised up, because the end goal is that we're going to roll ink over the surface of our block, and anything that's at surface level, that's at the level that it is right now, is going to catch the ink. So I haven't carved yet. If I were to roll on ink, it would just be one black rectangle. Anytime that I carve, I'm going to create a little dent. And that is going to mean that the ink is not going to catch. So I carved out that little white part right there. So the kind of most confusing thing to think about is that all of my outlines are black. So the outline of the leaf here is black. So I'm going to need to carve my whole background here away, and I'll also need to carve out these shapes inside my leaf, but I have to leave these black lines open, or leave those black lines at the top, at the surface. So as you're carving, you're gonna have these little rubber pieces, and those can just go into the trash. The direction that you carve doesn't really matter, but it might be easiest to just go row by row here to make sure that you are carving equally all the way across. You can change directions periodically if you need to. Now, carving does not need to be very deep. So I want you to notice I didn't go very deep at all. There are a couple things I want you to keep in mind. When you're carving, you want to keep your tool kind of low and level. So if we do this sideways, you can see that my tool is very low. You would not want to carve kind of stabbing down into it. Your tool should go in very gently and smoothly. If you have any resistance or it's hard to carve, you need to stop. You're not doing something right. You also might notice that I did an outline first on the area that I was going to carve in. So I kind of carved around here to create a little a buffer or an edge so that I don't carve into the area that I need to leave raised up. So I'm going to keep carving away at my background. Okay, so now I have carved quite a bit of my project. I'm about halfway done with my carving, and I want you to notice that everything that I want to be white, I have carved away. So my whole background I want to be white, and the inside of each leaf shape is going to be white, but notice that I want this black outline all the way around my leaf here. So I left that raised up, so you can see that I left that raised. I did not carve my black outline. I also have these little veins that go across in the leaf. And so I left those raised up too because I want those to catch the ink. So notice that I only carved down the areas that I want to be white. I still have a lot of work to do. I'm going to carve out all of the white parts on the inside of those leaves, leaving the black outline just like I did over here. And I've got to carve out my white stripes and some of the back of this little pot there. Okay, so here I go. So now I have finished carving, or at least I feel like I'm finished carving. I may go back and make some finishing touches after I do my test print. So you might notice that on mine, I decided to leave a little border here. So you might make some decisions as you're carving. I decided I wanted a black border rather than my white outline go all the way out to the edge. So that's something that I might change later. I can always carve it off later if I want to. So all of the areas that are black, including colored in areas like the stripe or the dirt inside the pot and the tabletop, are all at surface level. I didn't carve them at all. I left them popped up. So you can notice that the stripes here are there. I did not carve them at all. I also did not carve all of my black outlines because I want those to catch the ink as well. But all of the inside of the leaves, I went ahead and carved. Notice that the carving is not very deep at all. So if I put my tool in here, you can see I wasn't very deep at all. The deeper you go, you might poke a hole through it, and that's gonna make it really hard to print. So now I'm ready to do my test print, and that's just a print to see how my carving ended up looking. This is to get mixed in with your ink because they'll mess up with your print quality. So this is a great time to stop and clean up your surface.